Okay, so we're about to start chapter 8, but I do want to go over one point from the end of chapter 7. At the end of chapter 7, we discussed the question of brachas on something that's nishtana tzurosan, that lost its form. Something is crushed to the extent that it's no longer recognizable. We said there's a machlekes, rishonim and achronim, as to what the bracha is. The Rambam says that it loses its original bracha. Sorry, that it maintains its bracha. I'm trying to remember. The Rambam says that it maintains its bracha. Rashi says that it loses its bracha. And then we had the kind of compromise that the Rambam brings, that it depends. If it's something that you can still tell from the texture, then it retains the bracha. But if you cannot tell at all, not from the way it appears, not from the texture, then it loses the bracha and goes down to shahakol. So we said that the Ashkenazim Paskin like the Ramah, and we said that Sfardim Paskin like the Mechaber, who brings only the Rambam's opinion. But the truth is, I was not precise in that, because it's not so clear in the Mechaber what he paskins, because he only brings down what the Rambam says about dates. If you crush dates, you make them into a paste, that is ha'etz. But that doesn't mean necessarily that he holds that the same would apply to something that does not have a recognizable texture. So it's not 100% clear. So the Yalkut Yosef paskins that way, that even if you can't recognize the texture at all, it remains with its original bracha. But there are other Sephardic poskim, Ben Ishchai, and others that say no. We can understand the Mechaber to mean only dates and similar things whose texture is still recognizable, but not something that is totally crushed beyond recognition. There would be shahakol. Yes.
Yeah, I had that question today. I found in my lunch I got like these little like a fruit leather, the fruit leather like where it's like smashed, and so yep. I was thinking about all this, but I thought, well, it's pretty unrecognizable. I mean, I know it's from fruit, but I don't know how it was made. So I thought it might be shahakol, but I don't know.
Right. I believe fruit leather is shahakol. I believe it is considered to be nishtana tzurasa, to have changed its shape. But I'm not 100% sure how it is made. But let me have a look in the back of the Bodmer book. Shahakol merenefashos. Fruit ingredient is pureed and unrecognizable, therefore make shahakol. Yeah. Okay, so I did want to discuss one point about that, which is why I'm reviewing it. And that is that there is a question if, in order to go down to shahakol, is it A, that it's crushed, and B, that it's not recognizable? Or is it simply the fact that it's not recognizable? The cases that the Mechaber himself brings and the Alter Rebbe brings are that it's crushed beyond recognition. But let's say it would not be crushed, but it would still not be recognizable. What's the halacha then? Do we say, well, the fact is it's not recognizable, so it's shahakol? Or do we say, no, it's only if it's crushed beyond recognition that it loses the bracha? But if it's actually whole and it's just flattened, so you don't recognize it, but it's actually the same exact thing, just flat, or something like that, perhaps it is still the same bracha. So we discussed last week the question of cornflakes, Kellogg's cornflakes. You can't tell that those cornflakes are from corn, right? But all the Birchos books say that Kellogg's cornflakes is ha'adama. Why is that? Because even though it is not recognizable, but it was not actually crushed. It's just a flat piece. It's a flattened kernel of corn. And the same thing with popcorn. Some say that the reason you say ha'adam on popcorn is because it's a whole popped kernel of corn. So it's basically turned inside out, but it's not actually crushed. So even if you can't tell what it is, right, it doesn't look like a kernel of corn anymore, but it's not crushed. So it keeps its original bracha. So that is just something I wanted to mention. Somebody sent me a picture today of corn. It's like a chip made of flattened corn popcorn. Basically, corn popcorn flattened into a chip. And they asked me the bracha. So I think it's called Corn Pops. That's just the name of the brand. But it's actual popped corn flattened. So I said, based on this opinion, this is all the way it's explained in the Sefer V'Zoysa Bracha, that it would seem that should be Adam. Even though it just looks like a piece of, like a chip. Corn chips are usually shahakal, because corn chips are made out of, corn meal, which is made into, paste and then flattened and roasted and all of that. So it's basically loses its form and becomes shahakal. However, here, since popcorn is hadama, according to most poskim, and when it's flattened into a chip, it's still the same thing, never loses its form, so it would seem that should be hadam. Let me see if I can find the picture that he sent me and share it with this group so you can see it for yourself. It's actually nice that he asked me this shaila just now. Perfect timing. Looking for him and not finding him. Second. Here we are. All right, I just posted it on the group. That's what it is. Popcorners, the crunchy and wholesome popcorn snack. And sweet and salty kettle corn. If you look at it, it looks like, if you look carefully at the texture, it looks like it's bumpy because it's actual kernels of popcorn flattened. So it would seem that should be on based on what we're learning. All right, my friends, let us continue with chapter 8. All right, thank you, Manuel, for posting the English. So whoever needs it, it's been posted on the chat. Okay, bracha achroina, bein shel oichlin, bein shel mashkin, tzrichem shir, she'ein mevorchem oisa, elam koin, she's miachal kashir aroin li is nikar achila v'leitin. Ashasa kashir aroin li is shasiya. When it comes to the after bracha, whether of food or of drinks, one needs to eat a shiur. We don't make a bracha unless you ate a shiur, which means an amount that is fit to be called eating and not simply tasting. Or drinking an amount that is fit to be called drinking. When it comes to eating in the Torah, it means at least a kazayas. And drinking is referring to not less than one revius. Shu beitza umechza b'klipasa, which is a kibetza and a half with the shell. Now it's interesting, by the way, that he says this, because when it comes to eating, we find the shiur of kazayas by many things. Right, the shiur of kazayas is the shiur for most mitzvahs. When it comes to eating mitzvahs, eating a matzah on Pesach, eating in the sukkah on the first day, night of Sukkot, eating, forbidden foods, the havdil, if we can say, right? All of these things is a kazayas, to be chayav in the case of forbidden foods. So we see that the Torah refers to eating as a kazayas. When it comes to drinking, though, it's not so clear. Take, for example, drinking on Yom Kippur. Shiur over there is a roiv revius. It's not an entire revius, it's a roiv revius, a majority of a revius, which is one cheekful. So it's not 100% clear, but nevertheless, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. Not sure exactly where what it's based on, but that's what it is. Va'afilu, here comes the chiddush. Va'afilu shoyskan mashke choref v'chazak. Even if a person drinks strong alcoholic beverages, shederach alerim lishtes min ma'at, and it's normal to drink only a small amount of that beverage, kemo yayin, so for example, whiskey. So therefore, I might think you're chayev to say bracha achrona on less than a revius, because the normal way is to drink less than a revius, rather a shot or whatever. The pleasure of his drinking is not significant. It does not have the shiur of the normal amount of something that people drink, which is a revius. Those chips, it would seem, are adama because they are crushed popcorn. According to the, if you read the fine print, and popcorn is adama, and it's simply it's flattened, I shouldn't say crushed, it's flattened popcorn. So it's therefore, it would seem that the bracha does not change. Okay, now I want to point out, when I mention the halacha of whiskey and so on, so it's important to mention that there is another opinion. When the Alter Rebbe says this, he's saying this because there is another opinion. The opinion of the Taz is that we go by each food according to the normal way of consuming it. So when it comes to whiskey, it's normal to consume it in smaller quantities. And therefore, the bracha achrona should be recited even in a smaller quantity. And he brings this concept in halacha concerning Hilchos Shabbos. Comes to Hilchos Shabbos. So there's a halacha that the shiur to be chayav for carrying is the shiur of whatever is considered significant of that item. So when it comes to foods, for example, there's a standard amount for foods, But if it's a food item that is normally consumed in smaller quantities, then you're chayav for the smaller quantity. So, for example, salt, it's not a kazayas of salt, because who eats a kazayas of salt? It's rather the amount of salt you need to salt a kazayas. Or maybe it's a chicken egg. I think it's a chicken egg, the amount of salt you need to salt a chicken egg or something like that. So therefore, we see that the shiur is according to each item separately based on the way that item is consumed. So the same thing here, says the Taz, that you're chayev, terms are not chayev, you're chayev in bracha achrona, according to each item based on the way it's consumed.
I'm sorry.
You didn't mute yourself. There you are. Okay, so most poskim disagree with the Taz, and they say that it's true concerning Hilchos Shabbos that we find, but that's because when it comes to carrying, the shiur is based on what is considered important. When it comes to eating, however, there's a standard of what the Torah considers eating, and eating is a kazayas, regardless of the food. Now, this has nafkaminas, by the way, also concerning foods that are normally consumed in longer periods of time. Take, for example, a hot tea or a hot coffee, right? A coffee without milk. Cafe butts, as they call them here, Turkish coffee, or even black coffee without milk, where it's normal to consume it in a longer time period. On the contrary, it's abnormal to drink it quickly. So according to the Taz, it needs a bracha achrona, because that is the normal way to drink it. It's normal to drink it slow, and therefore you're chayiv when you drink it slow. Same thing with ice cream. You eat it slowly. A candy, right? The normal way is to suck a candy. You'll never eat a kazayas of a candy in a kedech that's pras. That's not the normal way. You suck the candy, right? According to the Taz, you'd make a bracha achrona. However, according to the Alter Rebbe, Mishnah Berurah, and most poskim, you do not make a bracha achrona on any of these things. I mean, we'll see later about drinks that there's a machlekes about the amount of time for drinks. But let's just talk about solid foods for now. So candy or something like that, there is no bracha achrona, because that is not consumed in its measure of kazayas in the kedei achilas pras. Here, so far, he only spoke about the size. He didn't speak about the amount of time. That's going to be the next halacha. But it's the same principle. Do we go by the individual food, or is there a standard? According to the Taz, you go by the individual food. According to most HaNehenin, you go by the standard. Excuse me. So, you will notice at some kiddushes on Shabbos morning that some people will pour themselves a little shot glass of whiskey, and they'll say, Al ken berach Hashem sim Shabbos v'karasheyu, savrim anon rachata Hashem l'kein v'chalam, shehakol niyabed v'aray. Anybody seen that?
I've seen that, and also I see guys, they take a little plastic cup and they kind of squeeze it so it makes it like a full cup, but it's, you know what I mean.
That's weird. That's weird.
They take a plastic cup and they fill it like halfway, and then they squeeze it so it goes to the top, and I guess that's supposed to mean it's a full cup. I don't know. I never figured that one out.
Interesting. I don't know if that works. There is a concept of artificially making a cup full. For example, you can add like a stone, or in our language, you can add a piece of ice to make it reach the top. But first of all, it has to have a revius before that. You know what I'm saying? and then you can add something to bring it to the top. Here, where it's artificially being pushed to the top, I don't know if that works. But if it has a revius anyway, you're yotze, even if it's not to the top. So anyway, I'm not sure about that. But
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry, maybe a little bit off topic, but somehow related. Is there such a thing as not doing kiddush on a plastic or cup? I mean, that you need a cost an important.
There is such a thing, yes. There is such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The argument can be made that it's not considered a keli since it's a throwaway item.
Mm-hmm.
There is such a thing, and it's better, certainly it's better to make it on a permanent type of cup. But Moshe Feinstein says you're yotze also with the plastic cup.
Okay, thank you.
Is that less strict like for a daytime meal than a nighttime meal, or is all the same?
Generally, the halachas of both are the same, except for the fact that the nighttime meal is d'oraisa, the daytime meal is d'rabbanan. So even though the halachas are technically the same, but there is room to be more lenient by day, just because it's not a Torah level obligation. On the other hand, not about the day or night, but Reb Moshe says that you could be yotze with a throwaway cup, and many people do that. But it is worth pointing out that I have not found any posek that actually says to use two plastic cups. Has anybody seen that?
You mean one inside the other?
One inside the other, yes.
Yeah, I see people do it here.
Right.
Pretty sure I've done it myself.
I don't know
That's
why.
a common custom. That's a common custom. And the reason that people, do it is because they figure, well, one is a throwaway cup. A two is not throwaway because I'm using two. So I wouldn't throw away the second one right now because I didn't use it yet. You know what I'm saying? I didn't drink from it. So it's not yet throwaway. That's the concept. However, I have not seen that mentioned in any actual poskim. And logically, it does not hold water. Because the fact is each cup individually is throwaway. So what? You didn't use it yet, so you're not going to throw it away right now. But the fact is it's a throwaway cup. So if you don't consider one cup a keli, then using two cups is not going to make it into a keli. Again, I know people do it, and it can't hurt to do it. But those that would argue that it's not good because it's throwaway would actually say that you need an actual cup that you don't actually throw away. So, coming back to the Taz, the reason that some people make Kiddush, as you'll see, Shabbos morning, on a glass of whiskey, a small shot glass of whiskey, is because they're following the opinion of the Taz. And just like the Taz says that it's important enough to make a bracha achrona, because that's the normal way to consume it, he says the same thing about making Kiddush. So that's the basis of those that follow that minhag. However, it is worth pointing out that if you're passing it like the Taz, that it's a smaller shear for Kiddush, then you should pass it like the Taz also. There's a smaller shear for bracha achrona, and not just for this, but for other things also. You need to say, hey, make a bracha achrona on that mashka, not just Shabbos morning, but even during the week. Anytime you have it, you pass like the Taz. So you have to make a bar nefashos on less than a revius. And for that matter, other things too, other foods also. What about candy? What about hot coffee and whatever? You want to pass like the Taz? Okay, pass like the Taz. But why only by Kiddush and by nothing else? Besides the fact that why you pass like the Taz against the against the Alter Rebbe and the Mishnah Berurah. Like, what's the basis to do that? Okay, some people do it, fine. I don't know what their basis is, but why only by Kiddush and not by bracha achrayna? That is something that is a mystery to me. Okay, v'yesh mistapkim bebracha achrayna shel yain. Al-Teba continues in the end of halacha 1. Some are not sure about the final bracha on wine. If you make a bracha of al-hagefen on a kazayis, got it? Some say that's the same shear of eating and drinking when it comes to wine. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, don't drink between a kazayis and a revius. Drink either less than a kazayis of wine or more than a revius of wine. Because if you drink in between, you'll be stuck with a question mark. Fact is, if you had more than a kazayis, less than a revius, you should not make an after bracha because it's a doubt. Safek brachas lahakil. Excuse me. But in the first place, you should not put yourself in that position. And you should drink either less than a kazayis or more than a revius. When is there a practical application to this? Havdalah. When it comes to Kiddush, even if you have less than a revius, right? You make Kiddush, you drink most of a revius, but not the whole revius. Share the wine around some other people, fine. You don't make a bracha achrayna, you wash, and you eat your meal and you bench. Benching covers the Kiddush wine, like we've said in the past, because Kiddush is a necessary component of the meal. So it makes no difference that you have a question whether a kazayis is enough to make a bracha achrayna, you need a revius, because you're covered by benching anyway. However, Havdalah, which is not usually followed by a meal, is going to be a question. If you only drink a majority of a revius, which is a kazayis, by the way, right? Male lugmav, cheekful. Even though we go by each individual's cheek, but generally that is more than a kazayis. But it's not a revius. So you can have a question if you're supposed to make an al-hagefen or not. And that is the reason, according to the Mishnah Berurah, for the minhag that the person who makes Havdalah is accustomed to drink the entire cup. He saves some to put out the fire with. But other than that, he drinks the entire cup. Yes? Give me some feedback here, Voisa. Yes?
That sounds right. Yeah, that's what I do.
Have you ever seen somebody share their Havdalah wine with other people?
Yes, but just a little
Oh,
bit
you have?
after he drank. Yeah, but after he drank most of the cup.
Okay, well, of course it's after he drinks most of the cup.
It's
That's
kind
true
of like
by...
just getting, it's kind of like getting shiurim from Kiddush. Same thing, I think.
Oh, yeah, but it's not usual. It's not usual. You don't see it by most people. You're saying you've seen it.
Yeah.
You're saying you've seen it, but that's the exception to the rule. Definitely the exception to the rule. Anybody else seen that? That people share their Havdalah wine after?
Isn't that, during the 9 days, I think, that you give it to a kid or something like that?
No, that's something else. That's because they don't want to drink wine or
Yeah,
grape juice in the 9 days. I'm talking about the rest of the year.
I share it with men. Is that a problem?
You share it with men. Okay.
Meaning specifically not women.
There is a minhag. Yeah, women have a minhag not to drink Havdalah wine. But there is a minhag that's brought in the Shulei HaLeket that Amavdil Ragel L'Shtois Kulei. It's usual for the person who makes Havdalah to drink the entire cup. It's not a chiyuv, it's just a minhag. If you don't have that minhag, you don't have it. But the Mishnah Berurah brings the reason for that minhag is perhaps this concept. that if you are going to drink the whole thing, you're not going to have a question about the bracha, right? If you're going to drink only a roiv revius, you're going to share the rest around, then there's a question on the bracha achrona, because maybe you're supposed to make it for roiv revius, maybe you have to drink a whole revius, so you'll be left hanging in terms of the bracha achrona.
I mean, I make sure to drink revius, and then I give the rest
If you
out.
drink revius, then you're covered from that perspective.
What's the Indian to drink
So,
the
yeah,
whole
'cause-
thing? It's just maybe because of the suffix of rovivis and overvius?
That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Shivlei Aleket doesn't say the reason for this minhag. He just says that that's the minhag. The Mishnah Berurah says that the reason for this minhag perhaps is this concept, that otherwise you'd be left with this question.
What's the
But
Indian
frankly
right?
speaking, one second, let me just finish this concept. Frankly speaking, there's a question on this Mishnah Berurah. Because why is that minhag only brought by Havdalah wine? What about kois shel bracha after benching? After benching, it's very usual for the person who benches to share the wine around. After all, it's a kois shel bracha, not less than kiddush or Havdalah or any of those other kois shel bracha, bris milah or whatever. And that's normal, people share it around. Well, according to this concept that the Mishnah Berurah brings, you're going to have the same question. If you don't drink a revius and you share it around, then you're going to have a question about the after bracha. So why not have the same minhag over there? So lemaisa, it's not clear that that's the reason for the minhag of the shivlei aleket. It's the only reason that I'm havdalah. So there may be other reasons, but lemaisa, by both of them, regardless of whether you share or not, you should make sure to drink a revius, because otherwise you can have a question on the after bracha. Yes, Rafal, what were you going to say?
What's the Indian by Pesach to dafka have the whole cup?
I don't remember. It's a machlekes of shonim.
I saw it brought down a lechatchila, you should drink the whole cup.
Yeah, it's based on a machlekes of shonim. I don't know the reason why by Pesach it's different.
Oh.
I don't remember.
And what's the reason women don't drink Havdalah wine?
It has to do with their part in the Chet Eitz Hadas, which the Chet Eitz Hadas, the full impact of that Chet was not felt until after Shabbos, because Adam was not chased out of the garden until after Shabbos. And some say that the Eitz Hadas was a grapevine and that Chava squeezed the grapes to make wine, and that the sin of the Eitz Hadas was drinking wine. So it has to do with that, because the effect of the sin was on Motzei Shabbos, and the liquid, the sin was done with wine. So that's why they don't drink it. Which is why, by the way, the Shmir Shabbos brings down in a footnote that a woman who wants to make Havdalah, talking about an Ashkenazi woman, right? Sfaradim have a problem with women making Havdalah because they hold that a woman shouldn't say a bracha that they're not mechuyevin. There's a question if women are mechuyevin Havdalah. But Ashkenazim, who hold that a woman is allowed to make a bracha that they're not obligated in. So if a woman wants to make Havdalah, there's a problem, because how's she going to drink the Havdalah wine if the custom is for women not to drink Havdalah wine? So Shlomo Zalman says in a footnote there, she should make Havdalah on Chamar Medina. Specifically make Havdalah on an important beverage other than wine. And that way she'll still be fulfilling this minhag of not drinking Havdalah wine. Because it's not wine.
It's a serious minhag, I see.
Yeah, apparently so.
Al pi Kabbalah.
And I guess. I don't remember, but I
What's
guess,
with
yeah.
the women having beards if they drink Havdalah wine? Any truth?
I never heard of that. I mean, I heard people saying it, but I never saw that.
Maybe it's a good way to refrain
that.
from ever thinking about drinking it.
Yeah, perhaps.
Shkoyach.
Rabbi,
No problem. Yes.
so the bracha krona halagafen would cover not only the behind the wine, but also any. So if you drink less than a revis of wine and then drink some Coca-Cola, they join together.
They don't join together, no, because they're a different bracha. They're a different bracha achroina.
Or water or something. No? But la grappa would cover the Coca-Cola. If you
know what? We're going to see later. We're going to see later that two foods can join together for a shear of a smaller bracha, of a lesser bracha. So actually, it would seem that you would be able to make a burn of flushes. As long as it has the same shear. In other words, you can't join in foods that have a different shear, like foods and drinks. One is a kazayas, one is a revius. They're not going to join together. But foods that have the same shear can join together. So it would seem that if you have a revius of wine and no, actually, I'm just realizing you can make a burn of fashas if you have a revius of wine, right, plus the rest of the revius of Coca-Cola or any other drink. So it's true you can make a burn of fashas. However, you still don't go out of the question of ala gefen, because burn of fashas does not cover ala gefen. So it could be that you're still left hanging as far as the ala gefen is concerned. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's not really going to help. Now, as far as having some mazoinus and covering yourself with ala mechia and adding in the ala gefen, that's problematic because you're not supposed to, in the first place, add extra words that may not belong there. We discussed this in the past, that I have a friend who would usually have just a revius of Havdalah. That was his regular Seder. And then he would have Mazoinus, and he would say ala michya, and he would throw an ala gefen into that ala michya, because after all, he's saying the bracha anyway, and he may as well throw in the ala gefen. And I told him to stop doing that because you're left with the question, because you're not really supposed to add in words that don't belong there. Now, that being said, if you're in that situation and you have no other way out of your doubt, then you can do that. But you should not make a practice out of it. You need to say in the first place, you should simply drink Ervius, and that way he should, he'll be able to say ala gefen, no problem.
okay.
Okay, ya ba 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 ba, ya ba
Okay,
ba
but
ba
just
ba
back on the thing where he's saying when he was drinking the spirit. So does he if he doesn't drink the whole revius, can he still say an after bracha, or does he have to drink the revius on the whiskey?
According to Alter Rebbe, you have to drink revius of the whiskey.
Okay,
Otherwise there is no after bracha.
got it.
And hence you have the minhag that, I don't want to call it a minhag, because it's not a minhag. You have the practice that you'll see some of the Babbacher guys who make Kiddush on vodka will make Kiddush on a regular becher, and a regular cup of vodka. It's not a minhag because it's not preferred to make Kiddush on beverages other than wine, nor is it generally, encouraged to drink that much hard liquor. But nevertheless, it is a practice that some people do. It's based on the fact that we don't pass it like the Taz. So you cannot be Yotze Kiddush with less than a Roiv Revius.
So we don't pass him like the Taz, but I guess people who do, can they do that practice? Can they rely on the Taz, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, they do it. I'm not sure what their basis is, especially if they don't pass on like the Taz concerning the bracha achrayna, which I don't think they do. I'm not really sure who says you can pass on like the Taz. I don't really know where that minhag comes from. I mean, a lot of people do it, but I don't know what it's based on, to be honest with you.
I don't think they know either. So
That's probably true.
thank you.
No,
Baba, wine and
problem.
grape to combine, I assume.
Wine and grape juice absolutely combine. Yes, no question about it.
Say if you say a bracha on wine, and then you have at one point less than a revis, then you bring out the grape juice. It didn't say a bracha on the grape juice. Before, I mean, you don't have to say another bracha rishona. I mean, you don't have to say
Correct.
another agafen.
Correct.
Okay, and then they come for the.
They combine for the bracha achrayna as well.
They said it with this wording.
I have to mute you, David. Oh, there. Okay, there you are. Okay. So what were you saying? Yes, about grape juice. Yeah, grape juice counts towards the shear, no question. Yeah. But once you brought up this question of where they get this idea of making Kiddush by day on less than a shear, just going to look it up in the Piskei Teshuvos. He's a pretty reliable source for modern minhagim, modern questions. Let's see if he discusses this. No, I don't see him discussing it by Kiddush Day. We'll just go to Kiddush Night and see if he discusses it there. Give me a moment. I'm just going to go to the table of contents and see if he brings it down in the table of contents. Give me a moment, please. Resh Ayin Aleph. Shir HaKois. Shir HaKois, maybe there it is. Plus Aleph. Okay, just I have two places to look up. Give me a moment, please. It doesn't bring down this minute. Okay, let's see. Please. Test. It just brings down the idea of making Kiddush by day on other beverages besides as wine, for example, hard alcohol. But I don't see him bringing down the shear. I don't see him discussing the shear. Okay, I don't know where this minhag is discussed. Sorry. Okay. Now, I do want to point out also, my friends, that the Mishnah Berurah holds that this doubt about a kezias of wine or a revius of wine is not just about wine, but it's about all drinks. Tosfos, which is the source of this doubt, brings it about wine, but the Mishnah Berurah holds that it's only an example that Tosfos brings it down about wine. But it's not only about wine, it's about all drinks. However, the Alter Rebbe clearly holds it's only about wine. As you can see, when it comes to drinks in general, he says before, it's a revius. And then he says, only wine. Or the Alter Rebbe has this doubt. Okay, we continue with halacha beis, and we say, Achal kachatzi zayis. If a person ate a half a kazayis, l'shoha ma'at, and he waited a little bit, achazu achal kachatzi zayis, and he ate another half a zayis. Yesh mitchilas achila rishon, at seif achila achrona, yosem mechdech pras. If the amount of time that it took him to eat from when he started till when he finished the kazayis is more than kedei achilas pras. What's a pras? It's a pras, half a loaf of bread. How big is this loaf? Shuchatzi kiko shoshisha beitzim. It's a half a loaf of 6 eggs. There's a machlekes actually if a pras is half a loaf of 6 eggs or half a loaf of 8 eggs. However, because we're talking about brachas here, and the halacha is safek brachas lahakel, so to be able to make the bracha achrona, you have to be able to say, well, I had it in the smaller shear. And that's what Alter Rebbe only brings down the shear of half a loaf of 6 eggs, which would be a smaller shear, rather than half a loaf of 8 eggs, which is a bigger shear. Because to be able to make the bracha achrona, you have to have it in a small amount of time.
And that's, I would say, it's 2 minutes. No?
There's so many opinions about Achilas Pras. It's mamash machaya to have so many opinions. They range from 2 minutes to 3 minutes to 4 minutes to 5 to 6 to 9 to 11. And I'm sure there's other opinions that I'm not even mentioning. And Lamaisa, the poskim say to try to do it in less than 3. I don't know if the poskim are choshesh for the opinion of 2, but to try to do it in less than 3. But Lamaisa, you could stretch it to 4 or 5 or even 6. But lechatchila to try to do it within 3. If it's in more time than that, then the eating is not mitzdarif. And this is, of course, a halacha that is not just about brachas, it's about mitzvahs in general. If you want to be yotzei matzah on Pesach, sukkahs, eating in the sukkah and sukkahs, so on and so forth. All eating mitzvahs have to be in the shir. The same thing applies if you ate non-stop, but you ate very slowly. You'd chew each bite 100 times, or whatever it is. So you never stopped eating mamash. But the fact is, from the beginning of the kazayas till the end of the kazayas, was more than kedei achilas pras, no bracha achroin. Whenever you take longer than a kedei achilas pras, the 2 achilas are counted as 1. Now comes the chiddush. This is true that all of the food that you ate within this time span comes together for a shiur or bracha achrona, even if you made 2 brachos rishonos. For example, you changed your spot in between. You made the bracha inside, and then you had to run outside. And the halacha is that whenever you change your location, and it's a short bracha achrona food, a bar nefashos food, whenever you change the location, you have to make another bracha rishona. Okay, you made a bracha rishona. Now you finished your kazayas, and it's within 3 minutes, for argument's sake. You have to make a bracha achrona, because the fact is, in your stomach, the food arrived within the shiur. So you have that satisfaction. The bracha achrona is on that satisfaction. The fact that in your mind, you were mafsik and you have to make 2 brachas rishonos, okay, that's all fine and good. But when it comes to the bracha achrona, which is on satisfaction, you had that satisfaction in the requisite amount of time, and you make a bracha achrona. By the way, the Alter Rebbe says, if you want to figure out the shiur of kedei achilas pras, so you have to use wheat bread, you have to lean while you're eating it, like they used to on the couches. And that, by the way, makes it more likely you're going to eat quicker, because you're totally focused on that. There's nothing else, distracting you. And you're eating it with a dip. So you're dipping it in some kind of baba ganoush, hummus, who knows what. So it's not dry, it goes faster. And you're not doing other things. You're not checking your phone while you're eating or anything like that. Like I saw in a little cartoon in Geula today, that 2 birds were sitting on the phone wire, and one bird points to a scarecrow and he says, "That's a scarecrow, that's not a person." And the other bird says, "How do you know it's not a person?" And the first bird says, "Because it's not looking at its phone." Anyway, so Lamaisa, when you want to make this measurement, you have to eat it quickly, and eat it quickly, no distractions. Now, it's interesting, by the way, the poskim who discuss the shiur of kedei achilas pras, they all discuss it. I can't say all because I didn't look up all of them, but the ones that I looked up, they try to figure out the shiur of kedei achilas pras based on other concepts in halacha. It has to be this because we find the shiur elsewhere, and elsewhere it's this amount, so it has to be that amount. It's based on something else, it has to be this. But I don't remember any of them saying, I took 3 eggs worth of wheat bread and I laid myself down on a couch and I got myself some hummus and I ate it without distractions and I timed it and it took this amount of time. I didn't see any of the poskim saying that. I guess because it's difficult to use that measurement. Everybody has different amounts of eating and so on and so forth. But that's the measurement that's actually given in halach. Okay, we move on with halacha 3. The fikach, therefore. We're going to come to, by the way, the shiur for drinks in halacha vav. So everything we're learning until now, in terms of the shiur of kedei cheles pras, is good for food. And the drinks we're going to see later. But let's learn more about foods now. The fikach, therefore, kemach shalechad mechameshes min edav. Excuse me, the flour of one of the types of grain, shiurim kemach shel min kidneys, that you mixed with the flour of other legumes, not the 5 grains of wheat, barley, spelt oats, and rye, but other legumes. Let's talk about corn flour, quinoa flour, almond flour, soy flour, lentil flour, you name it. All of these things, besides rice flour. Notice I didn't talk about rice flour, because that's coming up. But all these other flours. Now, you're going to say hamoitzi, regardless of the amount of grain in there, as long as the grain can be tasted. As long as the taste of grain can be tasted, you're going to say hamoitzi, because it's bread. We're not talking about, you didn't make a cake or anything. You made bread. Okay, it has other ingredients, but it's still bread. So you're eating bread. And we discussed in the past that grain is important and it always becomes the main thing. So it's the main thing. You say hamoitzi, no question. Nevertheless, you don't bench unless you have in the flour 1 kazayas for every kedei chilas pras. A pras, we said, is 3 eggs. 1 kazayas, which is half an egg, for every 3 eggs means 1/6. We discussed this in the past. If you have a mixture that is 1/6 wheat flour and the rest are other ingredients, you can make hamoitzi. You must make hamoitzi, no question about it. Hamoitzi you could say even less than that ratio, but you can certainly say hamoitzi in that ratio, and you can even say birchos hamazon on a kazayas total. If you eat a kazayas of this bread, even though it's only 1/6 grain, but that 1/6 grain has transformed the entire bread to be considered like that grain, and therefore you make birchos hamazon when you eat a kazayas, according to the first opinion.
So only 1/6. If it's 1/7, no.
No. You don't say benching. We're going to see later if you're going to say ala michya or bar nefashos. We're going to see in halacha daled. There's a question if you say bar nefashos ala michya if it's less than 1/6, but you definitely cannot bench. I mentioned last time we have a guest who's gluten-free. He comes often for Friday night, and my wife makes him gluten-free chalas, which you have to have, for the challah to hold together. If it's gluten-free, you have to have all kinds of other ingredients, because gluten is what makes the dough stick together. So my wife asked me when she was making the dough, originally she was figuring it out, she asked me the proportion that she needs. So I told her 1/6. But now that we learn these halachas, we see that it's true, it's 1/6 to say Hamoitzi and to say Birchos Hamazon. However, some say, the next opinion, that you actually have to go ahead and eat 6 kazesim, all within Kedei Chilas Pras. The Yeshem, here it comes, Yeshem Shem Birchos Hamazon al Ad Sheyechol Kol HaPras. Some say in order to bench, you have to eat the entire half loaf. If you have a half loaf that is made with 1/6 grain, and the other 5/6 are other flours, and you want to bench, according to the second opinion, you must eat this entire half loaf to be able to eat a kazayas total of grain. And not only that, you have to eat the entire half loaf in the shear of eating a half loaf. You know what I'm saying? You have to sit yourself down and eat 6 kazesim without any distractions and eating it quickly, eating it straight, doing nothing else. Very difficult to imagine that happening. We should be suspicious of their opinion and be makel in terms of a safek bracha. What does it mean to be makel in terms of a safek bracha? It's a safek bracha, so what's the kula? There's a question which bracha to make. Why is it a kula to make one bracha or the other? The answer is because according to the second opinion, the correct after bracha is al hamichya. And al hamichya can cover you in the place of benching, at least b'diavad. So it's a kula to say al hamichya. Because to say Birchos Hamazon is to say 4 separate brachas, which might not be necessary. To say al hamichya, you're saying they're correct after bracha according to the second opinion, and you're yotze b'diavad according to the first opinion. So that's the kula. Question?
Yeah, right. When your wife was preparing this challah
Yeah.
for the gluten-free or whatever,
Yeah.
does she separates or she makes a big quantity? And what happens? That's question number 1. Number 2, if you have a proportion like 1/6 on that mix, what do you need to do to separate?
To separate challah, that's a good question. I don't remember what the halacha is in terms of challah. I don't remember. I don't know if she makes the shear or not. I know she only does it once every few months because she makes a bunch and she freezes them. So I imagine she makes a shear. I don't know about the bracha on challah. You can always take challah without a bracha. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. No, but if you want to say, I mean, I think
if you want to say the bracha, I don't know.
5 pounds or something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it has to be 5 pounds of grain or it can be mixed like this, this ratio mix. I really don't know. But I saw something interesting in Yerushalayim. You come across interesting things here. So what do you guys do with the challah, with the piece of challah that your wife separates?
Burn it. I think.
Burn it. So that's what it says in halacha. You're supposed to burn it. But some say, well, if you burn the challah, it's like the forbidden food in your kitchen, And then what if you use the oven while it still has the smell of the challah in it? It's a forbidden smell. So some say, you know what? Better not to burn it, better just to double wrap it and throw it out. Even though in halacha it says clearly it's better to burn. But the reason for the other opinion is that, you're not supposed to bake anything in that oven as long as it has a smell in it. So to take care of that problem, they say just to double wrap it and throw it out. So I'm walking down the streets of Yerushalayim and I see a little box attached to a pole. And it says, here you can fulfill the mitzvah of challah in the best possible way. Deposit your kezayis of challah here. Put 5 shekel on the side, little pushka, and we will burn it for you. Amachaya. You're doing the mitzvah of burning the challah, but you're not doing it in your oven, so you don't have to worry about anything else that you use the oven for. So it's a machaya.
It's a business.
It's also a business, but it's not a lucrative business, trust me, because nobody's making sure you're putting in the 5 shekel. But it's only in Yerushalayim and Bnei Brak, I'm sure. Okay. Rabbi Sai, there's a question that has to be asked here. The question is that the Alter Rebbe brings down a similar discussion in in chapter 3, and he doesn't say the exact same thing he says here. He says something similar, but not exactly the same. So what's going on with that? Actually, before we turn back to chapter 3, I want to just mention that they bring here, when I say they, I mean Rabbi Green, as well as the English Sefer that you can find in the chat if you don't have it. Thank you, Emmanuel, again. They both bring that this question of whether you have to eat the entire 6 kezesim or whatever only applies to a mixture of less than a majority of grain. If the mixture is a majority grain, then they say there's no question that a kezayis is enough. So I don't know if my wife can do this, but if she can come up with a recipe that is 51% oats and 49% of the other stuff, then they say you don't have to eat 2 kezesim. Let's say it's 51 to 49. So really to eat a kezayis of grain, you would have to eat almost 2 kezesim. No, they say once it's a majority, it's enough to eat a kezayis for sure. So that's a good thing to know. They bring it down from Poiskim, Birchos, I think. I didn't look it up, so I don't know what it's based on, but that is what they say. Okay, now I'm just going to flip back to chapter 3, and I'm going to read what the Alter Rebbe says there, and we're going to notice it's not exactly the same as what he says here, so we're going to try to understand the reason for the difference. All right, here we go to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is talking about mixtures, right? Ikar and Tafel. Halacha 2.
Which seat are we doing there?
Halacha 2.
Okay.
Here goes. Min dagam, grain food, however nikar mazam, because it's satisfying, uchoshev ikar lo'olam, is always important and the main thing. Shafidu v'tam shel dvash min v'chayim, even if most of the dishes is honey or other types. And the minority is from one of the 5 grains. Even if the main thing in his mind is the honey or other things, right? Because he's making a sweet, dish. The whole purpose of adding the grain is only to give it flavor and prepare it, but it's not the main thing in his mind. Nevertheless, it becomes the main thing, and you make mezainas and halamechia. Okay, we're not talking about bread here. We're talking about a mixture of some kind of dish that has a grain food in it, but it has other ingredients. The grain becomes the main thing, right? Cholent, for example, right? You made cholent with barley, pearl barley. So let's just say, for argument's sake, pearl barley is bezonos. The bezonos becomes the main thing, even if you're in your mind, cholent is, the meat is the most important thing. The potatoes, who knows? No. Min dagon, grain is the main thing. Make bezonos. And the same thing with other mixtures or whatever. Listen here. That is only if there is a substance of grain. It only has the taste. For example, you cooked it with the mazonos, and you're not eating the mazonos. You're throwing it out or whatever. Somebody else is eating it. And you're just eating the dish without any of the actual mazonos. So it just has the flavor of the mazonos, but no actual mazonos. Then it's not mazonos. Okay, but according to the first opinion, notice, as long as it has the actual grain, you make mazonos, you make ala michya, regardless of how much that ratio is. It does not have to be 1/6, according to the first opinion. And some say, which is different, by the way, than what we said here. Here we said that to make the benching, you for sure have to have 1/6. Do you have to also eat the entire 6, or is it enough to only eat the 1? That is the question that he brought down in chapter 8. But everybody agrees that it has to be 1/6. Correct? Again, looking back in 8:3, he says, nevertheless, you don't bench unless it is a kezayis and a k'dechilas pras. So no opinion says that it's enough to have 10% flour, 5% flour, grain flour. Nobody says that in our halacha when it comes to bread and other flours mixed in.
Does this only apply for bread, or does it also work for mazonos?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it would apply to mazonos too. Chapter 8 would be referring to both bread or mazonos foods that are bread. I don't mean mazonos dishes like cholent or oatmeal. I'm talking about mazonos that is pasaba b'kisna, like cookies and cake, with mixtures of other flours. The difference, in my understanding, between chapter 3 and chapter 8, as we're going to see, is if it's a mixture of grain with other foods or a mixture of grain with flour, other flours. You understand? So if you want to talk about mazonos, if you want to talk about cheesecake, for example, cheesecake is made with mazonos flour, let's say. But you have the cheese part of it, the cheese component of it. So for that, you would look in halacha in chapter 3, because that's not a mixture of grain flour with other flour. It's a mixture of grain flour with other foods. So even though it's a cake, but it's a mixture of flour and other foods, that's relevant to chapter 3, halacha 2, which is what we're looking up now. But if you were to make a mazonos cake with other flours, right, some grain flour, some other flours, that's relevant to halacha, to chapter 8, halacha 3. For example, this is a very common thing, by the way. If you look in the breakfast cereals, a lot of the breakfast cereals are made with grain, but it's not the first ingredient. Meaning, say the first ingredient will be corn and tapoika and this and that and the other, And you'll find some grain in there as well. So the before bracha is mezainis, there's no question about it. But for the after bracha to be alamichya, A, it has to be 1/6 grain, and B, some will say you have to eat 6 kazesim if it's 1/6. You know what I'm saying? Or 4 kazesim if it's a third, 3 kazesim if it's a third. You know what I'm saying? 4 kazesim if it's a quarter, whatever it is. Follow me?
Yep.
Okay, so that's difference number one. And here it says, according to the first opinion, you don't have to have the ratio of 1/6. And then the second opinion, some say that to be able to say alamichya, you have to have a kazayas within a knecheles pras, 1/6. However, notice over here he doesn't say that you have to have all 6 kazesim. He just says to be able to say alamichya, you have to have 1/6. The ratio has to be 1/6. But it's mashma that once you have a kazayas of that, that's okay. You can say alamichya even though you didn't have all 6 kazesim, which is different than what we're saying in chapter 8. Chapter 8, we're saying you definitely have to have that ratio. And then some say it's enough to have kazayas, some say you have to have the kazayas, full kazayas of the actual grain. Okay, so this is a contradiction. And based on Rabbi Green and other sources, the way to resolve it is there it's a mixture of the grain and other foods. And the grain becomes the main thing. And therefore, some say it's enough to say alamichya just on a kazayas. Some say no, you need a 1/6. But definitely once you have 1/6, it becomes the main thing. And you can make an alamichya just on the kazayas. When it comes to a mixture of grain, flour, and other flour, so that's a more serious kind of mixture. Because there, it's min b'minoi. It's all in the same species. So when it's min b'sheina minoi, you know what I'm saying? It's the flour with other foods, flour with potatoes, flour with, I'm not talking about potato flour, I'm talking about actual potatoes, with cheese, with who knows what else. So the flour is the main thing. And therefore, perhaps you don't even need 1/6, perhaps you have 1/6, it's enough to have 1 kazayas or whatever. Becomes the main thing. But when it's flour mixed with flour, so it's not so clear that it becomes the main thing because it's all one concept of flour. It's a concept of yavish b'yavish. It's not even yavish b'yavish. I take it back. Flour is considered lach malach, but it's more like min b'minai. It's more difficult for it to become nullified in the same species because it's all the same type of thing. It's all the same flour. So for it to take over, it definitely has to have that ratio. And some say, even with that ratio, it's only, it doesn't transform the flour into mazonis, into a grain, and you have to actually have the full kazayas of grain. So Lamaisa, when it comes to saying an alamichya on cheesecake, it's more lenient than saying saying Birchos Hamazon, for example, on my wife's gluten-free challah. Because the cheesecake, as long as it's 1/6 flour in the recipe, you could say alamichya on a kazayas worth. Even though there's a lot of cheese in there, there's 5 parts cheese, it's enough, 1/6 grain, alamichya, no problem. When it comes to the challah, which is made with other grain, not so simple. Some say you have to have a kazayas, full kazayas of actual grain. So that's how we resolve it. Questions?
And obviously, you're referring to the cheesecake that's cooked together.
Yeah, cooked together, yeah. That's correct. Thanks for pointing that out, correct. Okay, so this is also a big nafkamina, a big difference when it comes to those cereals, right? A cereal that's made with a mixture of grain flour and other flours, to be able to make it al michya, you're going to have the ratio. Oh, you know what? I take it back. Take it back. No, I take it back. Daniel, you asked if it applies to cake also, yes?
Yes.
So here's the thing. When it comes to cake, as long as you have the ratio of 1/6, it's fine. You don't have to eat all 6 parts. Because the opinion that says that you can't bench on 1/6 ratio until you have all 6 parts, which means you're having a kazayas of the grain, that opinion says you don't say Birchos hamazon. Instead, you say what? Ala mechia. You understand? You can't bench Birchos hamazon. Rather, you say ala mechia. So as long as you have 1/6 in a cake, it's enough to have a kazayas because ala mechia is the correct bracha anyway. See what I'm
But
saying?
you said Barabbas as in those first, because you were only planning to eat a kazayas.
You for sure say bar mazanis first. There's no question about it.
Unless you're planning on eating the whole cake, then you would have to say hamotzi, because then you were going to eat the 6 eggs.
No.
No?
To be able to say hamotzi on cake, you have to have more than 6 kazesim. Here I'm talking about 6 kazesim. You understand?
Oh, okay.
6
Okay,
kazesim represents the half loaf here, which will contain the full kazayas of grain flour. To be able to wash, you have to have 4 eggs, which is 8 kazesim, and you have to be full. So that's a whole different amount.
Okay, yeah, I remember all that. I just have to come back
Yeah.
and do that.
It's a different shear. Okay, but I'm just realizing now, as long as you have the 1/6 ratio, if it's a mazonos food, you're good to go, because the doubt of whether you have to eat all 6 parts or 1 part is enough is a doubt whether you're going to bench or say ala michya. But ala michya you for sure say, even just on 1 kazayas. So if it's a cake that's made of different flours, you'll be able to say ala michya as long as you have that 1/6 ratio.
You still need to eat that 1/6 in the 3 minutes.
Yeah, you still have to have it in the 3 minutes in the first place, maybe 4, 5, or 6, but in the first place for sure. But the question is, you have to have a kazayas of the food in that amount, or kazayas of the grain in that amount, which would mean to have 6 kazesim, you know what I'm saying? Or 3, depending if it's a half, if it's a third, if it's a 6, you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But that doubt only refers to bread, because when it comes to bread, there's a question if you have to have the full amount of grain or not. And if it's enough to have less than that, you'll go down to ala michya. But I'm saying if it's cake, then ala michya is good anyway, as long as you have that ratio. This is something that is worth somebody doing research. All the breakfast cereals that have grain in them, are they 1/6 grain or not? If they're less than 1/6 grain, then even though you say an ala michya, there's a question about the after bracha. If it's more than 1/6 grain, then you can say ala michya just on a kazayas. Okay, my friends, we go back to chapter 8, and we continue with halacha 4, which discusses the after bracha if it's less than 1/6 grain. If the grain in the mixture is less than 1/6, you still say hamotzi because for the bracha rishayna you don't need a shear, and it's the main thing. So you say hamotzi. No matter how much you eat, you're not going to bench because there's no way you're going to eat a kazayas. Because there is no kazayas of grain in a pras and a half a loaf. It's less than 1/6. However, the first opinion says you still say ala mechia even if you only have a kazayas. Because it tastes like bread, even though it doesn't have the substance of bread, only a small amount, that renders it enough for an ala mechia. Some are not sure about it. What are they not sure about? They say that it's only good enough for the bracha or shayna, but not for the after bracha at all. So you would say hamotzi before and burn a fashas afterwards. Therefore, it's proper not to eat from this bread unless it's during a meal. Again, a bread that is less than 1/6 grain is for sure hamotzi before, is for sure not benching afterwards, but it's a question if it's ala michi afterwards or burn a fashas afterwards. Because of that doubt, it's better to have it only during a meal. Or, of course, you could also have a different ala michi food and a different burn a fashas food, and then you'll say both brachas achronis and you'll be covered anyway. That's another option.
Would this be like cornbread, something like that?
This would be like cornbread, depending on the ratio, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know the normal ratio in cornbread, but depending on the ratio, this could be relevant to that, yes. All right, halacha hey, here we go. I mentioned before that I was not talking about rice. Rice is different. Why is rice different? As if you mixed wheat flour with oirez flour, which is normally translated as rice. Sorry. You make the bracha of benching afterwards. It must have been a pass if you made bread out of it. Or made shalosh must have been a tavshil, or alamichia if you made a dish out of it. Even if it does not have a kazayas in a half a loaf, meaning it says less than 1/6, as long as you can taste the grain. Here's the thing. When it comes to rice, it has a special character that wheat flour influences the taste of the rice flour and makes it all taste like wheat flour. The wheat flour brings out a certain flavor in the rice flour, and it all tastes like wheat flour. Now, I can't really explain this begashmis, but that's what he says. So, if you want to talk about those cereals, those breakfast cereals, if it's rice flour mixed with wheat flour, then you would say ala michya, even if it's less than 1/6. And in terms of gluten-free bread, is rice gluten-free or does rice have gluten? I don't know. Anybody?
I don't think it has gluten.
You don't think it has gluten. So you could do this, but then you're not going to have gluten-free, I'm just realizing. Because if you're using wheat flour, it's not going to be gluten-free. And oat flour, this halacha hey does not apply to oat flour and rice flour. It's a specific halacha about a specific mix. The mix of wheat flour, not grain flour, wheat flour with rice flour. Wheat flour specifically influences rice flour specifically and transforms the taste to wheat flour. But it doesn't apply to anything other than wheat. It doesn't apply to anything other than rice. So it's not going to help you to have gluten-free because wheat is going to be gluten. But lemaise, if you have a mixture of wheat flour and rice flour, that's going to be hamotzi and benching, no problem, as long as the taste of the wheat is discernible. If it's such a small amount that's not even discernible, obviously it's not influencing the rice flour. Now, Rabbi Green, in his Sefer, explaining the Alter Rebbe, discusses why the Alter Rebbe just says oiras here and doesn't remind us that he said before that oiras maybe is millet. We said the Alter Rebbe before was not sure if oiras is millet or rice, the whole question, whatever. So it's possible that he doesn't repeat that question because you already know it and you're supposed to apply your knowledge here also. It's also possible, Rabbi Green says, that over here it's a physical question and you should try yourself, experiment yourself, because it's not about the halachic question, it's about the practical question. If you mixed it, the wheat flour and the rice flour, and it tastes like wheat, good. We know that it's oiras. If it doesn't taste like wheat, well, I guess rice is not oiras, I guess it's millet. If you mix millet flour with wheat and it tastes like wheat, oh, good. This must be oiras. If you mix it and it doesn't taste like it, okay, I guess millet is not oiras, it must be rice. That's his take on the matter. Clear? All clear, everybody say? Yes?
So this last
Right there.
case, the last case here was only talking about wheat flour. It wasn't talking about like oats or anything like
Correct.
that. Mixed with
Only
rice.
wheat flour, correct. Okay. We continue and we say. Halacha Vav, Shir Tzir Shasiya, the amount that you have to, the amount of time you have to consider drinking as one. Some say that the shear of drinking a revius is the amount of time it takes to drink a revius. Basically, you have to drink it down right away. If you drink half of it very quickly and then you waited a little bit and continued, if in the total amount it took you the amount of time it takes to drink a revius for an average person, it's start from zem zeh, then the drink goes together. If it's more than that, the shear does not join together. The same thing if you didn't interrupt, but you waited that amount of time in your drinking.
So what's this talking about? Is this talking if I'm drinking like apple juice and orange juice or different things?
No. You're drinking one liquid, no mixtures. I mean, there could be a mixture, but that's not the point. That's
It's not a mixture. I'm drinking an apple juice, like a half a shear.
You're drinking apple juice. You're drinking a revius, but you're not drinking it down at once. You drink, you put it down. You drink, you put it down. According to the first opinion, you're not going to be able to say bar nefashos.
Yeah.
Because you have to have the revius in the amount of time it takes to drink a revius, which is a few seconds. Okay, people don't usually gulp it down. So it's not like 1 second. Maybe it's 5 seconds. Maybe it's 10 seconds. But it's not 3 minutes. It's very far from 3 minutes.
And it could be different for different drinks. Like, water, you can drink it faster than maybe some strong whatever.
That's the question of the Taz. The Taz who says that you can say Bar Nefashos on a small amount of whiskey will also say you can say Bar Nefashos on hot coffee if you drink it slowly, because that's the normal way to drink it. You understand? He says that these shiurim are relative. They're not fixed, they're relative to the food. But we don't paskin like the Taz. So according to the Taz, so the way we paskin, you have to actually have a revius and the amount of time it takes to have a revius, according to the first opinion. There's another opinion coming in.
So what do we do when we're drinking really hot coffee or hot tea? I mean, it's like...
According to those who paskin like the first opinion, which is none other than the Sfardim, you never, ever make a Bar Nefashos on hot coffee or tea.
Huh.
Never. Why? If you drink it slowly, you didn't drink it fast enough. If you drink it quickly, they say, that's not normal. It's not normal to drink it so quickly that it's, the same way you drink cold beverages. And because you did that, it's considered an abnormal way of consuming it, and you don't make an after bracha when you consume something abnormally. The bottom line is, Sfardim do not make an after bracha on coffee or tea. The Mishnah Berurah recommends, in order to get out of the question, we didn't even read the second opinion yet, but it's coming up in a minute. But the Mishnah Berurah says, to get out of the question, if you're drinking a hot beverage, leave a revius over towards the end, wait till it cools down, and drink it down quickly. And then you'll be able to say Bar Nefashos according to all opinions. Follow?
Okay.
However, here's opinion number 2. V'yeshem, some say, Shashir, Tzir Fashasiyas Revius, V'chtei Achilas Pras, Kamoi Tzir Fachila. The amount of time for drinks is the same amount of time as you have for eating. V'chein Iker, that is the main halacha. This is very unusual, my friends. In Hilchas Brachas, the refrain that we find almost all the time is Safek Brachas Lahakel. If you don't know, skip the bracha. It's a machlokes. We don't know what the halacha is. Skip the bracha. Don't say it in the case of a doubt. Here, somewhat unusually, the Alter Rebbe says, no, we know the halacha. This is the halacha. We're going to allow you to make a Bar Nefashos, even if you didn't drink it down quickly, as long as you had it b'chtei achilas pras. Interestingly, the Alter Rebbe and the Vilna Gaon both agree on this. The Gra also passes like the second opinion. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings that L'maisa the minhag, at least for non-Chabad, because Chabad follows Alter Rebbe, but the minhag, he says, in general, is to not make an after bracha, unless you drink it down quickly. So, according to Mishnah Berurah, the minhag for not Chabad is, once again, drink it down quickly or do not make an after bracha. The fikach, therefore, yesh levarach bracha achroina al kaveh v'tei chamen, based on the Alter Rebbe's psak that you could say Bar Nefashos, even if you drink it slowly, as long as it's in the 3-minute time slot or 5 or 6 max. Afal pishas to say ma'at, even if you drink it a little bit at a time, in Mashah, Yosef Mechtechilas Pras, as long as you have it within K'dechilas Pras. Now that we're on the discussion of eating and drinking, so I also want to mention foods that are now solid but can become a liquid. For example, ice cream, ice pops, and whatnot. So some say, I believe Rabbi Yosef says, we treat it as a liquid, and therefore there is no Bar Nefashos according to him, because for Sfardim you have to have it in the amount of time it takes to drink. Very short amount of time. Nobody has ice cream that quickly. However, I did see in the V'zois HaBracha, the Sefer V'zois HaBracha, he says that if you eat it like ice cream, i.e., you're not drinking it, you're eating it, you're chewing it. You know what I'm saying? You're taking a bite out of it, and you're chewing it. Then he says there's no question that it's considered a food, and you go by a kazayas in an achilas pras, and not a revius, and not in the shear of drinking, but in the shear of eating.
So like a Slurpee.
A Slurpee, you're drinking actually. A Slurpee,
But some
you're
people
drinking.
I use a spoon sometimes.
Right. There is another concept that is brought down, that's something that is made of liquid, pure liquid, like a Slurpee, is considered like a drink. But something that's made of other ingredients that could be a solid, like ice cream, which is made of milk, which could be made into cheese or eggs, could also be a solid. So they say that there's more reason to treat it like a solid. Lemaisa, if you pass like the Alter Rebbe, the shear anyway is Kedei Achilas Pras, even for drinks. So it's not such an afkamina. But for Sfardim and the minhag of the Mishnah Berurah, where you only say bernafashas for drinks if you have them right away, so yeah, it's going to be a question. Even on the Slurpee, it's going to be a question. Because even if you're eating it, some say that because it's made out of pure liquid, it has the shear of liquid. So that's going to be a question.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Sure. All right, my friends, halacha zayin. This we mentioned briefly before. Kol ha'oichlin mitzarfen zem zeh lekazayis. V'orach la'achreim kibirkas hakal shebehem. K'ganoch l'kachatzi zeh b'sayin aminim. U'kachatzi zayis midova shebrachas hachoyrim ber nefashos. V'orach ha'chem ar shabbos. V'mach l'kazayis pas kachatzi zayis b'shus aminim v'orach la'achreim mein shalosh. This is a tremendous chiddush, Rabbi Isai. We know that when it comes to after brachas, we don't, one is not moitzi the other. It's not like before brachas where shahakal covers you on everything, and so on. Bar nefashos covers you on bar nefashos. Alamichya and alamichya, benching on benching. Truth is, benching might cover some alamichya foods, but yevid, alamichya might cover benching, but yevid. But bar nefashos definitely not. Bar nefashos only covers bar nefashos. Nevertheless, when it comes to different foods that you eat, the rule is that if you don't eat a kazayas of one food, but you have it together with another food, it's mitzdaref for the lesser bracha. So again, if you have bread and cake, total of kazayas, you can't bench because you didn't have a kazayas of bread, but you can say alamichya, the lesser bracha. If you had cake together with a fruit, you can't say alamichya because that's a bigger bracha, but you can say bar nefashos. They count together towards the smaller bracha.
Can you repeat that again? I didn't understand that part. So you're saying that the you go by the lesser amount of food that you're eating?
No. If you have a kazayas between two different types of food, if they have the same after bracha, there's no question about it. You had cake and you had porridge. Both are ala michya. And you had a half a kazayas of each within a kedei achilas pras, within 3 minutes, for argument's sake. You say ala michya, no problem. What's the difference? If it's just because half cake and half porridge, you had a kazayas, and it's both ala michya, no problem. The same thing if you had a fruit, half a kazayas of fruit and a half a kazayas of marshmallows. Fact is, you had a kazayas with bar nefashos food, you make a bar nefashos. No question about it. But let's say you had half a kazayas of fruit and half a kazayas of cake. One is ala mechia, one is bar nefashos, two totally different after brachas. Alter Rebbe says the two count towards the lesser bracha. The lesser bracha between ala mechia and bar nefashos is bar nefashos. If you had half a kazayas of each, you make bar nefashos.
Do Sephardim agree?
Do Sephardim agree? That's an interesting question. I don't recall. Can't say I looked it up. I think it's in Rishon Beis. 1 second, please.
In the meantime, do Ashkenazim agree?
I believe Ashkenazim agree, yeah. I believe so, yeah. I don't believe there's a machlokes in Ashkenazim about it. Cannot say about Sephardim. Hold on 1 second. Rishon Beis, I think it is. Shukbar is it further? No, sorry. Where is it? Let's try where I should. Brachos Mekazayas, No, I don't connect to that here either. No, Sephardim do not agree. At least Al-Qud Yosef doesn't agree. I don't know all the opinions. Al-Qud Yosef says, "Ha'oichel chatzi kezayis miperesh v'samirim, chatzi kezayis b'osam v'dogim, v'mishar peres lever ha'chachem brachachem klal, v'gam l'vichz b'rafashav al tas adif."
That's in the Yalkut Yosef.
Yeah,
And what siman?
Reish Ches Daled. Now that I'm looking at the notes, I'm wondering if the Mishnah Berurah says so too. Even though he brings the Magen Avram, says this, but he brings Achronim who argue the Magen Avram. So I want to check the Mishnah Berurah and see if how he can hold on. What I remember from the Birchos books, like the, what I'm saying, the Bodner types of books, what I'm remembering is that that Ashkenazim do paskin like this. But I just want to make sure the Mishnah Berurah, hold on. Gosh, I just lost it. Give me one moment, please. I just lost my lights there. Just flickered out. Let me look at Rabbi Bodner. He would probably bring this down. Okay, Rabbi Bodner says if one eats half a gazais of food, which is soaked in burn of fashas, half a gazais which is soaked in main sholish, the bracha is burn of fashas. Okay, yeah, so that's how he paskins. I assume that's the Mishnah Berurah's psak.
So you always go for the lesser bracha chrona, practically.
For Ashkenazim, correct.
For Ashkenazim also, the only and for Chabad. So the only people who the only posik that doesn't follow that is the Chacham Ovadia Yosef.
Yeah,
What page is that? Sorry, Rabbi.
382 in Bodner, 382. For another example, one ate a single kazayas of meatballs and spaghetti. Generally, bracha achar for meatballs is ala mechya. In this case, a burn of flesh is required because he only had a half a kazayas of each. Okay.
Now, and I assume all these cases are basically that cannot be considered equal. No, it's just because once you get a mix, you go by the.
You go by the acre, is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, if it
You,
would.
you go by the acre as long as, I mean, if it's a mix of a ala mechya and other, grain foods and others, then you go by the acre. But to be able to say a burn of ala mechya, we did say it has to be 1/6. It's enough to have one kazayas, but it should have at least 1/6 of grain. Say ala mechya.
But I'm saying the combinations of two different brachos that we were mentioning.
Correct. Yeah. That's here. We're talking about two different foods. We're not talking about one food that's mixed, like spaghetti and meatballs. The whole question of the after bracha is if they're not cooked together. If they're cooked together and one is the main thing, then it becomes, as long as you have obviously you have 1/6 grain, you're right, it would be enough to just have a kazayas, that's correct. If they're cooked separately and you want both, so there's no ikar on tafel, so then it's 2 separate brachas before, and it's 2 separate after brachas, and if you have half of each, you make one.
The lesser one. Huh?
Yeah.
But
Actually,
is that-
if it's not cooked together, even if there's an ikar for the bracha rishona, I don't believe that it becomes one for the bracha achrayna. You know what I'm saying? I think even if there's an ikar and tafel, I think, you know what, I'm not sure about what I'm saying. I'm not sure about what I'm saying. I'm going to leave that. I'm not sure. You know what? I'm not sure. I think it's no, even for the bracha achrayna. Ikar and tafel, you're covered for the bracha achrayna. But here's the thing. If I'm not mistaken, here's the thing. If you cook the spaghetti and meatballs separately, and you mix them, and one is the ikar, one is the tafel, it's true that the bracha achrayna on the ikar covers the tafel, but that's only if you have a shear of the ikar. If you don't have a shear of the ikar, it's not going to combine in the shiur. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not really one food. It's 2 foods. There's an ikar and a tafel, and the bracha achrayna on one will cover the other. That's fine. But if you didn't eat a shear of the ikar, you can't make that bracha achrayna.
You say eating a shear of the ikar kedei achilas pras.
Yeah, kedei achilas pras, like everything else.
It's kedei achilas pras.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if it's the same bracha achrayna, bar nefashos or ala michya anyway, then it's no problem. But if it's 2 different brachas achraynas, then if you didn't have the shear of the bigger bracha achrayna item, of the bar nefashos item, you can't say the bar nefashos. You'll have to still say the bar nefashos. Let's just finish halacha zayin, even though it's late. All different drinks join together towards revius. However, food and drink are not mitzdarf to one another, neither for the kazas nor for the revius. This is a concept that we have many times in halacha, that things that have different shiurim are not mitzdarf. We have it concerning Tuma and Tara, we have it concerning Hilchos Shabbos, all kinds of different nafkaminas. But you can't join things that have different shiurim because they're not joinable, because they have different rules. So because drinks have a different shiur than eating in terms of size, they don't combine towards the size. This is also nafkamina on Yom Kippur, lamashal. A person who is not well, Rahman al-Islam, he has to eat and drink on Yom Kippur. Within the kedei achilas pras, he can have both the amount of food less than the shear and the drink less than the shear. We don't say, well, he's having food and drink, they go together to make a shear. No, food has its own shear, drink has its own shear. Within one kedei achilas pras, you can have both, wait a certain amount of time, and have, again, food and drink. Wait, have food and drink. Because they have different shiurim, they don't join together towards one shear for brachas or for eating on Yom Kippur or for anything like that. All right, Rabbi Isai, next Monday and Tuesday night, we are back on schedule in Mirz Hashem and Highland Lakes Shul.
Rosh.
Oh,
Of
Baruch
course,
Hashem.
if Mashiach comes beforehand,
We'll join you.
Hashem, we'll learn here somewhere in the Beis HaMikdash area.
Amen.
We'll post it on WhatsApp where it is. Otherwise, we're back in Highland Lakes Monday night.
Rabbi, tomorrow,
No shir tomorrow.
not sure.
I'll be in the plane.
So Monday
It's a shame.
night, that's it. Okay, Yesher Koach, Rabbi.
Go'el
My
Shalom.
pleasure.
Baruch haba.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thank you.
see you soon. Toda.
See you.
Zat Hashem. Zat
Safe
Hashem.
travels, Nasiat Tova. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Good night.